Hi, welcome to the PhoneArena video review of the Motorola MILESTONE XT720, Motorola's multimedia Android powerhouse. On the front of the device is a 3.7-inch WVGA screen, and on the back an 8-megapixel camera with a Xenon flash. So this device looks set to challenge handsets such as the Sony Ericsson Xperia X10 and the Samsung Galaxy S. Let's see how it did. Below the screen, at the bottom of the device, is a microphone. Underneath the screen directly are 4 capacitive Android buttons. The screen itself is WVGA resolution. It is 3.7 inches and therefore pixel density is very good and it looks really nice and sharp. Switch the screen off and you immediately notice an extremely reflective, glossy front. This will be a love-hate thing. On the one hand, it looks very slick, but on the other, it attracts fingerprints like nobody's business. Above the screen is the in-call speaker. Also on the front of the device are 3 icons. These indicate whether the camera is in photo mode, video mode, or gallery mode. On the right of the device are the buttons I was just pressing. The camera button needs to be held down to access the camera. To the right of that button is another button that needs to be pressed to switch between modes. There is a volume rocker on the top of the right hand side of the device. On the top of the phone is a power and hold button and a 3.5mm headphone jack. There is also a mini HDMI port for outputting the HD video captured on the device. On the left hand side of the device is a micro USB port. If we flip to the back of the device, we'll see a lens with autofocus, a Xenon flash, and the camera is 8 megapixels, so as I mentioned earlier, directly competes with that of the Sony Ericsson Xperia X10 and trumps most other Android cameras. The back is a metallic navy blue finish. It is matted and therefore feels very nicely contrasting to the glossy front. When we remove the back panel, which by the way is metal and feels very solid, which we like, we find the battery, a micro SDHC slot, and a SIM card slot. The battery cover slides on extremely securely and feels great. Overall, while the device looks a little bit retro, kind of like a PCMCIA card, the MILESTONE XT720 comes with Google Android 2.1. And when you look at it, you can tell it is an Android device, as Motorola haven't skinned it too heavily. They haven't even included their Moto Blur option, so things like widgets are all going to be the native Android ones, though this isn't really a problem. At the top, there is a pull-down notification bar, and at the bottom, a pull-up menu. There is a call button on the bottom right, which brings up the dialer, and a messaging tab on the bottom left. Flicking between menus looks really nice because the screen is such a good resolution and menus have a lot of space. The criticism would be that it's not an entirely smooth process, as the processor is underpowered compared with the 1 GHz processors out there at the moment. This one has a 550 MHz processor, at least on the European release anyway. Pull up the bottom menu, and you see the menu is also a little bit stuttery compared with other devices out there. The wallpapers on the main screen are either live, like the one in the background, or static, like more traditional Android wallpapers. We found that the live wallpapers slowed down the device a bit too much. The static wallpapers make everything run a little bit more smoothly, again due to the processor. The features we really liked on the XT720 were the music player, which does a good job of sorting out your songs, and the gallery, which is very attractive. Yet again, however, the gallery isn't completely smooth. The reason for this being the processor, and so for waiting for images that are slightly larger to render, you can sometimes spend far too long waiting, and in turn just get bored. Eventually though, they do, and once they've rendered, they look fantastic on the phone screen. Yet another example of where it would have really paid to have a faster processor. Occasionally, the gallery can even completely jam the device. And this is a real shame, as if it was implemented well, it would have been a real treat to use. Standard Google functions, such as the onboard calendar and phone book, work well, however, are also affected by the slowdown, as is pretty much every aspect of the device. When looking through the phone book, for example, it takes a while to open the dialer, and takes a while to open up all your contacts, and all the images take a while to refresh. This is a real continuous thing throughout using the device. Everything tends to take a while. Web browsing on the device is a pleasure, for the most part. The screen is huge, and web pages are loaded very well indeed. There is a double tap to zoom option, or a pinch to zoom option. Web pages are displayed either in portrait or landscape mode. And when viewing in landscape mode, you can really make out most of the information on the web page due to the large screen. Through the Wi-Fi on board and HSGPA, pages are loaded up quickly and displayed very well. The only downside is, especially when pinching to zoom, there is generally lag. Again, we will attribute this to the slower processor of the European release. The on-screen keyboard is viewable in both portrait and landscape modes. In landscape especially, it is a pleasure to use. There is very nice haptic feedback, the keys are responsive, and it provides one of the best keyboard experiences we've used. The predictive text is a little bit frustrating and tends to take over a little bit more often than we would like it to. However, this can be switched off, and once it is, we found using the keyboard fantastic. Even in portrait, the keyboard isn't a bad experience when typing one-handed. Even with big hands, we found that the keys were responsive and, for the most part, accurate. The screen on the XT720 was made for video. It looks stunning, crisp, and the colors come through very well. Viewing angles are great, and we really can't complain about very much, except for the lack of XVID or DivX codec support. You can download additional software from the Android market to enable these file formats. However, due to the slow processor, their resolution has to be relatively low. Overall though, watching movies and shows on the device will be a real treat. To wrap up, the Milestone XT720 is a frustrating device. Not because it isn't good, but because it could have been great. With the lag when switching home screens and thumbing through the menus, it just doesn't feel finished and polished like the HTC Desire does, or the Apple iPhone 4. The camera is great. While the images are over-softened, it still performs better than most other handsets on the market. And coupling that with Android could have been a wonderful thing. Sadly, however, it just feels underpowered due to the slow processor. If you're looking for alternatives, then the Xperia X10 has a faster processor, though the interface is still a little bit laggy, and it is still on Android 1.6. Other alternatives which will make you sacrifice on the 8 megapixel camera would be the Samsung Galaxy S, the HTC Desire, or if you want to leave Android, the iPhone 4. Thanks for visiting PhoneArena and watching the video review of the Milestone XT720. For more on this and other handsets, visit www.phonearena.com.